I'm going to go on mute. If I had some questions, do you mind if I hop in, Katie?
No problem at all. Let's do it.
Let's do it. It's all yours.
Awesome. So, hi, everyone. I'm Katie Palenchar, investor and global head of venture studio at Anthemis Group. We're a global fintech venture capital firm. And so getting right to it today, the fintech sector, banking industry, now more than ever are competing to implement initiatives and opportunities to provide true value to their customers. But despite this positive shift, far more needs to be done to achieve true diversity in the industry and in the world to reduce the wealth gap for underrepresented communities. So today's panel, we're here to discuss views on this changing landscape, how companies can better champion change through financial services and transform the industry for the better. I'm more than excited to be joined by two of Anthemis's portfolio co-founders and CEO, Rob Curtis, CEO and co-founder of Daylight, and Donald Hawkins, CEO and co-founder of First Boulevard. So Friday, 4:00 Eastern, we're going to get right to it. We're going to have some fun. Let's roll. Let's jump right into it. Would love to hear, Rob, we'll start with you, just an overview of your company, where you are today and all of the good stuff of how Daylight came to be.
Yeah, thank you, Katie. I'm Rob Curtis, CEO and co-founder of Daylight. I live the dream job. I have two wonderful co-founders, Billy Simmons and Paul Barnes-Hoggett, and a team of almost everyone in my team is an LGBT person, except for our one token straight guy who is the father of a trans kid. So we created Daylight as the first and only digital banking platform designed for the LGBT community, because despite common beliefs, LGBT people aren't all two rich guys with no kids with disposable income coming out of their ears. That is definitely a specific segment of people. They probably work in tech or banking, live in a coastal city. The fact of the matter is 20% of queer people are unbanked or underbanked. And the most financially underserved members of our community are trans women of color. And so when we take a community like the LGBT community, the way that banks and financial institutions and many brands talk to us is by putting a rainbow on it, maybe having some pictures of two queer women during the month of June, and then selling us products that aren't really designed for us. And what is really important for you to understand is that the LGBT community is large. If we put all of us together, we'd be the second largest state behind California with 30 million LGBT people in America. We spend about the GDP of Mexico with a combined spending power of $1 trillion every year. And we're growing. By the time we're finished, hundreds of queer kids will be born. And these are people that are incredibly empowered. The biggest rapper in America in our community is a Black gay man. And so they no longer see themselves through the lens of how many people still see us, which is a kind of echo of the AIDS crisis and the fight for marriage equality. This is a group of highly empowered cultural creators who are coming out of highly personalized worlds into banking, and they're realizing that it's kind of dumb. It doesn't work for them. They're not getting the services and support they need, whether that's family building or support for gender transitions. They're not being seen as who they are. And so we created Daylight as an antidote for that.
Awesome. Thanks so much. I love how many kind of myths that you smash right out of the gate. Donald, over to you on First Boulevard.
Katie, I got to get this out there first. The next time Rob and I are on a panel, please let me go before him.
We'll let you go first on the next one.
I hate following Rob's, man. He's so good. Such a good mission. We're big fans. Do this a lot with the Daylight team. Now, similar to Rob and team, we were motivated by a lot of the events of 2020 and civic unrest. And I realized that there were so many things that the Black community had just been going through, cycle over cycle, generation after generation. And went through a number of months of imposter syndrome, trying to figure out, is there something that I can potentially do to help the community? And even more selfishly, my wife and I found out that we were pregnant with our second child, a son, January of last year. And I was thinking really about him. Man, this kid is about to be born into a world with not a lot of good stuff going on. And went back in history and saw that we clearly were not the only underserved group and community in America, and learned a lot. Learned that the Jewish community struggled with putting money in white-owned banks and had to build their own financial institutions like Goldman Sachs to do business with each other. Same thing for the Italian immigrant community with Bank of Italy. That turned out okay when they converted over to Bank of America. And I learned the lesson of a lifetime around freedmen savings and trust, and how Black America had an opportunity to receive some type of financial equality, but that ended up, in a very bad form. And similar to Rob and team, we're all about providing fairness and equity in the financial ecosystem. So we focus on helping our community reclaim its economic impact. Black America spends $1.5 trillion every year in the US. That would make us the 13th largest country in the world. Unfortunately, less than 3% of those funds stay in our community. And we struggle as a result of that. And the second big focus for us was passive wealth building. What can we do through technology to help our members build wealth without having to think so much about it? And there's some negative statistics, that show why we need to have that happen sooner than later. A recent poll that came out earlier this year from Brookings shows that by 2053, the net median income of most Black families in the US is going to fall to zero. We all keep hearing about inflation. We all keep thinking about and hearing about jobs and lack of jobs. I remember growing up, Katie, there was always some plant opening up in some city nearby. And now I feel it's everybody just waiting on an Amazon warehouse. And if Amazon doesn't choose your city or state, so sorry. And there are a lot of people out there struggling right now that have not, received the proper type of banking. They've been underserved and unbanked for a while. And we're going to do our part to try to make it a little bit more equitable.
Awesome. Love it. So
can I just interject something? I know Donald said he wanted to go before Rob, but Donald, that was also a great introduction.
Yeah, it wasn't a Rob Curtis introduction though, Zach.
It was pretty powerful. Pretty powerful.
I try.
You're ready,
I've gotten better going after Rob all these times, man. It's easier now.
Well, I always learn so much every time, even though we're investors in the company. Every time you all speak, you teach me something new. So, Donna, we'll keep it with you. Going back to you, I think what's really interesting with what both of your companies do is you're not just focused in the here and now. You have a big mission on a big roadmap of where you're going to kind of eradicate some of this wealth gap that we see in our country, in the world. So curious, Donald, what are some of these key macro trends that you saw that led you to start First Boulevard? But then also, how do you see those, evolving over the next 5-10 years as consumer finance continues to evolve? So we'll start with you, and definitely want to hear from Rob too on that.
Yeah, for sure. The Black community has proven that we are amazing consumers, right? We spend a lot of money, too little of it stays in our communities, though. And when you think about the financial ecosystem, right now there really is no go-to bank, no go-to credit card, go-to home loan, auto loan company for the community. And we've seen a number of incumbent neobanks spend a lot of money and place a lot of resources, typically through influencers targeting our community, but there's not a lot of representation that comes with it. Many of these incumbents are onboarding hundreds of thousands of people each month, and we're going to those companies in droves primarily due to features like early direct deposit, right? Our community has always been extremely interested in understanding how we can build more wealth and how we can support each other, but we've been systematically blocked from understanding how money works. Don't believe me? Somebody go to Wall Street and just stand there and record for a little bit. It's a whole new language. And the statistics show that too. As an example, think about S&P 500. Right now, Black America holds only about 1.6% of S&P 500 stocks compared to 91.6% of white America, right? So even standard wealth building initiatives and features that many of us are already aware of, we don't have that density. We don't know as many people that we can reach out to and call on. So for us, we're putting a lot of energy and effort into helping Black America and our community incentivize themselves to spend money and keep it in the community. So we're working on features that help members use roundups, to save towards buying down debt, to potentially also use for spending money at Black-owned businesses where we can reward them for that. And a lot of other features that give people truly an investment that we make into them. And we feel the return on the investment for us is more financially savvy customers.
Amazing. Rob, Daylight.
This is one of those times where it's always hard to go after Donald.
You two better get used to it today. I think that's how it's going to go.
I mean, I think the macro trends that are really important for our community are a little bit different. So number one, social and legal recognition of our community has landed for huge parts of our community. I mean, LGBT people have been here the whole time. Most people didn't want to notice it. Most people didn't want to accept it. But the reality is that we are born into families all across the country. And so as we are being given permission to live openly, we need new things. We need homes, we need families, we need support for gender transition, our healthcare. And the fact of the matter is that because everyone has ignored us and just put rainbows on things, they've actually ignored massive industries for us. So I'll give you a couple of examples. 63% of millennial LGBT people want to have another child, and it's an average additional cost per child for us of about $55,000. If you want a surrogacy, then it's $100,000 plus. So that's about a $20 billion market and a savings gap that is out there right now, and nobody's building for it. If you take gender transitions, Folks Health estimate that size of the market at about $15 billion. And yet when I talk to a bank about creating loans for gender transitions, they say, I don't want to create a loan for somebody when the moment they start spending, it increases their risk score. Because everybody knows that when somebody begins a gender transition process, it is often they find themselves in very unstable employment afterwards. And so we've got these really interesting things. The number one funding source for healthcare for transgender Americans is GoFundMe. So we are a tenacious community that is using every tool under our belt, mutual aid, support for one another, GoFundMe, Venmo, to manage through our financial lives. But that leaves huge numbers of people outside of the mainstream finance system. So we've identified these pain points and we're really building towards those. But I'd say probably the biggest trend that we see that is not just going to impact Daylight, but every bank out there is we've got a generation of kids who have been raised on deeply personalized experiences on social media, on every app, in the metaverse, wherever they're playing. And they walk into what I imagine is the same banking experience that all four of us will have. And the fact of the matter is that because we are born into every community, every family in the country, to create a great LGBT banking experience means I have to personalize that. So a Black woman in Arkansas has an experience that is as tailored to her as an Australian immigrant in New York does. And so we see this combination of advancements in legal recognition, and we're not there on transgender Americans. That is still I'm seeing echoes of how gay men were treated, about never being allowed near playgrounds, never allowed to be teachers. We're seeing that kind of same progress happening for them at an accelerated pace, but that's going to progress. We're seeing an empowered generation of young people who have been told the entire way, you were born this way and you deserve everything in the world. And we're seeing technology and big banks is just too slow to be able to deliver upon the promise that we are giving to our kids. And so we see these as the macro trends that ultimately come together to allow us to be able to secure venture capital, which for LGBT folks building LGBT consumer businesses, I'm in this for. Grindr, 2 healthcare companies, and Daylight. That's how hard it is to be able to build these things, but the timing is right. We've got massive tailwinds. So it's been a really pleasant set of trends that we've been building upon.
Love that. And I think, something I often say is like, you cannot be what you cannot see. And so just being out in the market as leaders, what you're doing, all the business owners that are going to be born out of this, not only by, participating in the financial services that you're all bringing to market, but just who you are as leaders. So I love that. So kind of switching the mode up a little bit. So, here we are today, the current banking system, what do you think needs to change? And how are you going about cultivating that change? I mean, of course, so many parts of that are evident, but digging a little bit further, within current banking system. And are you currently working with any incumbent banks or financial institutions? And if so, how? I'll let you fight over this one.
Let me kick it off. Yeah. And I mean, Katie, great question. I feel intentionality is so important in solving problems. And one thing, just to double tap on what Rob mentioned, that excites me every day. So many of the pain points that we have in our communities are also what creates these amazing opportunities for us. I mean, listen to the numbers Rob just rattled off. Those crazy big markets that nobody's attacking, that, we have, the first rights to be able to go out and attack and hopefully solve. But moving past that, just with general partnerships, we were really mindful of the type of bank partner that we wanted to work with. There's lots of options nowadays in the neobank and fintech space. And we were very fortunate to have a relationship with a sponsor bank, Central Bank of Kansas City, their community development financial institution. And what we love so much about them and their team is that they were walking the talk before it was popular to do so. A lot of people joined the bandwagon in 2020. They've been about that business of helping underserved people and communities for a while. And so it was natural, a natural fit for us. And as a result, I feel like that's the true solution. Financial technology companies like ours working with incumbent banks on inclusivity, and helping people reach the goals they need to financially. So we've been able to work with them hand in hand around a lot of the features that we want to develop. I joke with the CBKC team all the time that I feel like they're building their own internal dev team specifically for us and the features that we want. And it makes it easier. I feel like that's something that a lot of larger organizations like the FDIC, for instance, has even thrown out there. Provide solutions. What are solutions that are available to help underserved communities? And I truly feel, the financial technology side of things that Daylight and First Boulevard are working on in connection with the incumbent banks who might not have the technological side or the marketing side to reach that community. It's the perfect combination, and it's working really well for us.
Love it.
And I think I'd probably jump off on a point about talking about our sponsor bank and our partners too, because we went to market and we could have gone with the easiest segment. Let's get some rich gay guys and sell them a card with a Grindr membership. We instead decided to focus on financial inclusion for transgender Americans, because what you may not realize is that when somebody begins a gender transition and they haven't updated their legal documents, they'll have a card in their dead name. And when you present that to point of sale and somebody sees somebody that looks like Sally, but the card says Steve, people that are in that situation, 30 to 40% of them are threatened with abuse, violence, criminality, police are called, they're refused service. And so this is a real safety issue. You don't want to be at a 7-Eleven at midnight in certain cities having to present in that way. So we decided, how could we empower this community? Let's give them a card in their own name, irrespective of what their legal ID says. Because my founder, Billy, did this at Capital One. She had to go to the courthouse, a doctor. She had to get a notary. She had to go to the teller. Every time outing herself as a trans woman, that is not safe or dignified. What that meant, though, to implement is we had to take a number of partners, our sponsor bank, MetaBank, our bank as a service partner, Marqeta, Visa, all of our integrations through a journey to help them to disconnect legal name as being the only way to be able to build a service layer. Obviously, we need this for compliance reasons, but actually, why do you need to service legal name in your SMS systems, in your email systems, in your cards? We have worked with those partners to separate these two things out, because this is an example of a use case that just wasn't thought about. And I think too many LGBT folks have been considered edge cases. We're doing the same thing with credit references, because we figured out a system to allow women to change their last name when they get married, which is important in some cultures, but not how to allow a person to change their first name and gender. We overmatch on name recognition, right? So we work with partners to try and solve those problems, because it is my brand promise is to solve those on behalf of my customers. And that means that anyone that wants to come and work with us has to meet us where our community is. And looking ahead to some of those big markets that we talked about, we've just recently partnered with Fidelity on a research project. There is almost no data on LGBT folks out there, because most banks don't want to record who they are, because they don't want to ever have to report on them, because they'll get a regulatory slap on the hand, because we're 38% more likely to be rejected for a mortgage. So instead, nobody knows who the LGBT customers are, so we can't design for them. We're partnering with Fidelity to undertake the market sizing, the deep product definition around surrogacy loans, around gender transition, financial support, and other life events and pain points that are serving the LGBT market, because actually we don't need all of those on our balance sheet. And what I love about what Donald said is this belief that I also have, which is when you design for inclusive communities, you design better products for everybody. I go by Rob. The only time I'm ever called Robert is when my mum yells at me. That means that having a card with Rob on it instead of Robert on it creates value for me, but we've just started from a diverse standpoint. And so as we go through, we have a number of responsibilities. We wear the mantle of as diverse leaders that are role models for others. That's hard. It's not necessarily what we signed up for. It's a great benefit. We have to educate the people around us, our community, our partners and investors, but we also have to educate the incumbent banking system who have blind spots about the things that they focus on every day just because nobody's come along and said, what about this? What about that? And so I think there's huge opportunities to partner with community neobanks and look at these niche problems, because ultimately let's solve problems for all of America while we're at it.
Awesome. Yeah, I mean, I think it's a huge opportunity, especially to partner with organizations that are 100% focused, heads down, understand what the needs are constantly, working towards that. I want to check in, Zach. Are we at Q&A? Do we have more time, or do we need to jump to Q&A?
I definitely have some more time.
Okay, cool. Let's keep it going. So I guess I'm curious because, super grateful for my job because I'm just constantly learning every single day, kind of smashing misnomers that I may even had, misperceptions as a person. So let's go into what you think is the most exciting change or opportunity you see in the fintech space. And it can be around your company's mission, tangentially related. You guys are living it day to day. Donna, what are you excited about?
Oh man, what am I not excited about? I think the session right before us, there was some reference to decentralization. There's some really exciting applications there, for underserved communities. I feel access to features and wealth building assets, NFTs, cryptocurrency, fractional investments, ETFs. So many of those things now are readily available, whereas before you would have to have brokerage accounts. And a lot of people in my community, especially, were not very interested, in going through those methods. So we've seen some glass half full, journeys where people are really highly leveraged now on fractional investments and the cryptocurrencies and things that I referenced before. But what we want to help with is helping people truly understand how a lot of those things work. So it's good when the trend is headed that way, because that's something that we feel as a company we have the ability to help mold and help consumers make better financial decisions, by working with a number of experts in different ways that they can help. So I feel like, those are a lot of things that are really interesting for me. The lending side of things is also super interesting, where we have one acquisition point, but we have the luxury, very similar to Rob and team, so many different features that we could potentially roll out in the future, from credit, from micro loans, auto loans, insurance, like you name it. Our communities, have struggled so much with so many of these features, and that provides all the opportunity that we need to scale and grow, even if we work with a smaller number of people. I'll stop there, but there's a lot of super exciting things in the fintech space that make a lot of the things we're talking about even easier to develop too.
And I think I'd come on with the thing that excites me most is this: money equals freedom, right? Whether that's freedom to jump on a rocket and go to space, or whether that's freedom to move to a city where you're not going to be spat on for walking down the street. And so I would like you to imagine this. Imagine 30 million Americans that have been told their entire life that they don't deserve the world, and who have been stuck at the bottom of Maslow's hierarchy of needs: safety, security, food, a roof over their heads. And imagine what a transformative effect we could have, not only on their lives, but their families' lives and society at large, if we allowed those people to self-actualize, to get to the top of Maslow's hierarchy of needs, to pursue their dreams and actually have a fulfilling future, one where they're not 50% likely to run out of retirement, one where they're not going to get to 40 and realize that children and families were unaffordable to them because nobody bothered to educate them early enough. And what I know about our community is we're not going to create 30 million nuclear families. Non-monogamy is increasingly important in our community. And so what I'm really excited about is powering massive social change that will start with the queer community, which at its core is a group of incredibly courageous people who want to be seen on their own terms and are tenacious enough to fight for that. Now, I think everybody around the world can learn from what these folks have gone through, including myself. And that is what excites me, is the work that First Boulevard and the work that Daylight does takes people that have been hidden in the margins, who are cultural creators. We are exceptional people who haven't been given opportunities. And I just cannot wait to see the world in a generation's time of people that have been given the resources they need to go and pursue their dreams, and to teach the rest of us where our blind spots are, meaning that we're missing out on experiences and views and knowledge that we could otherwise have had.
100%. And the massive network effects you're all creating with that. So you all know your customers inside and out. Kind of curious to hear I guess the biggest thing that you've learned about your customer, maybe something specific or in general that you felt that you didn't know going into this?
I'd say for us, the importance of customer service, which I guess we should have known, right? You think there's an affinity, that we have within our market and a very specific interest in what we're building, because quite frankly, our community hasn't had that type of representation. So it makes people feel good to know that we are unapologetic about our support of them, but also recognizing we have a really savvy community, right? That they understand some of the table stake features that we need to have. But the support is something that they're not playing with. Like, they really want to make sure that we are going to support them the way they feel they need to be supported. So for us, we recognize we don't really have the luxury of this being a lateral move from where they currently bank to working with us as a financial technology company, and we put a lot of energy, effort, and resources into making sure that we provide top-notch customer service, from a chat perspective, even a call center perspective that we're working on for them. And we went through some customer discovery. I thought I knew that a little bit, but the feedback was so overwhelming on make sure support is top-notch. That's been something I definitely like to lean on.
And I think what we've learned is financial education at the moment is largely a funnel to get people to buy products from an existing service provider. Nobody's giving financial education for free. Most of it's on a bank website, and the call to action on it is open an account. When we talk to our consumers, they tell us two things. I've been shamed my entire life, and I'm just managing to get out of that. I don't need someone bossing me around and telling me that I'm doing all of the things wrong. And so instead of, and to me, it doesn't matter whether you've got financial education, it matters whether or not you're adopting the right behaviors. And so we're actually skipping the financial education step and highly gamifying the way in which we help people change their behaviors. I'm really lucky to have worked in an alcohol change organization in the past, which is very big on behavioral science and very big on influencers. And so we'll do things like the 2022 challenge, save $20 a week for 22 weeks and have $500 to spend at Pride. Like, doesn't matter whether I tell people Pride's going to be in 6 months' time and it's going to be expensive. Make sure you prepare for it. We can gamify that. We can get celebrities on top. We can give badges, profiles, create an experience that feels exactly like the consumer experience that they've got. And as we do so, we're going to accidentally give people the financial education that they're not necessarily looking for. But I think that they'll learn. Sometimes you have to do in order to learn rather than learn in order to do. And so I think that has been a really great learning for us and really exciting for us, because there's huge community flywheels and network effects we can build around some of those things, which will feel more like a Peloton coach for your money than they will an article about 5 ways to build an emergency fund.
Awesome. And what I continue to hear, and, just in my work, is not only the communities, that you're specifically serving in these digital banks, but so many people that are interested in these services in support of these communities as well. So with that cliche interview question that I swore I would never ask again in my life, where do you all see Daylight, First Boulevard in the next 10 years?
Well, if Rob and team keep growing as fast as they are, I don't know, we might be acquired. I don't know, Rob. I'm excited.
You heard it here today, Friday, November 12th. We'll remember this, Donald.
They're growing like crazy. We love it. It's exciting. I think we're in a position where I'm just excited about the ripples that this will create in our community. We are one small little speck of a solution of many solutions that our community needs. We hope that what we're working on inspires other people to act in other industries too. We need help in healthcare, help in education. Our primary goal is to really focus on Black millennial women. They're the financial leaders, of Black America. Their parents, rely on them for feedback and insights. Their Gen Z, Gen Y, little brothers, sisters, nieces, and nephews look up to them, for advice, because they're the ones really leading the charge. Our hope is that if we can show as much love and support to Black millennial women in our community, that we just may, be able to provide the financial education and then support needed for those younger generations so that they don't get into the same trouble that so many of us have. And we feel changing those financial behaviors is going to be the most impactful thing that we can do. And we're putting a lot of energy and effort behind that. But that's what we're looking for. When we get to a generation of people where they're not working their way out of debt, they have all of the tools they need to build wealth from a young age, because we all know now that the most valuable thing that we can have to build wealth is time. Too often people in our community don't get started until at best their mid to late 30s, in most cases 40s and 50s. It's hard to generate wealth that you're going to need to survive and live off the rest of your life if you have to work until you're 60 paying off debt, from school loans and all these other loans that we have to take. So that's something that I'm really excited about, and we're definitely aligned to make happen.
That's really inspiring, Donald. I think we built Daylight because LGBT people are everywhere the sun shines. In 10 years' time, I want one of these in the hands of LGBT people everywhere in the world. Now, I know I'm not going to get there. There are countries out there right now that are criminalizing LGBT folks. They're pushing them off of buildings. They're not allowing movies in. But the pain points that our community experiences are universal and global. And there's 500 million LGBT people out there. We're the third largest economy in the world, according to Credit Suisse. And we want to shine a light on people's individual financial needs and to give them a fulfilling future to aim for. And our way to do that is to establish a footprint in every community that we can establish one in. Global communities, national communities, and local communities too, because all of them are different. Our goal is to have a Daylight card in the hand of queer people everywhere the sun shines.
Thank you, guys. Thank you both. I mean, as you can see, amazing thought leaders building amazing companies. Follow them on Twitter. Make sure you get to these websites. Follow all that content that's coming out. Zach, are we ready for some Q&A here?
We're definitely ready. So if you have questions for the team here, for Robin, Donald, and for Katie, submit that via the Q&A button there. I did get a direct question from Sophie, and I would actually ask of all three of you, what's the funding environment like for community-driven financial institutions today? What kind of feedback did you get from investors?
What feedback did you give, Katie? You cut the checks.
Oh, Lord. So, I think we've definitely seen a dramatic shift in the market. I mean, it's kind of wild with, I've been in this role a little bit over 2 years. And in one way, it feels like I've been doing it for 2 months. And another, it feels like 20 years, because where we started when we kicked off one of the specific funds that I lead within Anthemis Group, just kind of looking at where, how many companies were being started, what valuations we're at, the discussions we're having, how much capital was needed, the acceleration. And now we're just busier than ever. And it's like, what a great problem to have. So many amazing companies. It makes, we have fantastic jobs, but it does make it difficult. It's so many times. So I would say that the acceleration, I don't think anyone would have predicted what happened in DC. I think, when kind of COVID hit, we all just said, oh my gosh, right? Batten down the hatches, our portfolio okay? What's going to happen with, companies raising money? So, Rob, I'll hand it over to you, unless Donald, you have another kind of line for me on that one.
Yeah, look, I mean, we started 18 months ago and we closed our first seed check in June. Now, to get to that point, we had to have a product in the market with real users for many months, because frankly, when Donald and I were out there hustling for our first checks to establish a category of community-based neobanks, all we kept hearing was the market size is too small. Who needs a niche? Why aren't you serving everybody? And what's the functional pain point you're solving? This isn't as simple as buy now, pay later. And so we were laughed out of a lot of rooms. I mean, I certainly was, Donald, but I can only imagine. Fast forward 12 months. People have cottoned on to the idea that community is an exceptionally powerful tool. Differentiation is where the industry is moving. And neobanks are moving in the direction of becoming highly verticalized. And so I'd say the funding environment right now for any founder is off the charts. There is a lot of capital. Interest rates still haven't been raised. So there is always the opportunity to tap into that dynamic. But I think the last 12 months, by having leaders like Donald, myself, and Billy, my co-founder, who does a lot of work about educating others about these pain points, has created a funding environment that is much easier than it certainly was 12 months ago. It was a long slog to get our first check-in, but now it'll be a lot easier to get our second, I think.
Yeah, I think something that's... Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Donald.
No, you go for it, Katie.
Yeah, I was just going to say, as someone, specifically with female founders, that's where I've done a lot of my work. But in 2012, and, you would talk about some of these topics and it would be like, oh, don't talk about that. Oh, don't ask an investor about their portfolio, et cetera. And so it's like, here we are now, we're having this discussion, really getting into it. And it's like, I sound like an old lady, like 10 years ago, but it's so true. It's like, you won't raise capital if you talk about some of these things. So exciting to actually see companies, not just talking about it, companies being built around these things. Go ahead, Donald.
I was going to say, I agree with all of that. I just think there's a flip side also. There's also a level of responsibility that I feel we have that most founders never have to worry about, because we realized this small window, that we were able to take advantage of. And guess what? People are watching. People want to see the results of what we develop. And I know full well, that we are in a good position, that if we win, we make it that much easier for more people that look like us from our communities to also go out and raise capital. And that's something that I share with a lot of founders that I talk with. And I take that seriously, because I recognize, especially for what we're building with First Boulevard, if it wasn't for the movement of 2020, I think creating that small little crease, for some funds. And I got to give Katie and team credit. Like, they also were walking the talk before it was fun or performative. And we saw a lot of VCs in 2020 open up special funds for Black and brown founders. But I want you to go back and run the paper trail, see how much of that money was actually cut. Like, not very much was done, and we taken advantage of that opportunity. And I feel, we do the job we're supposed to do. It's going to also create other ripples in many other industries for founders that look like us.
Yeah. For sure. I mean, just being a gay guy, I'm 10% less likely, 10% as likely to be funded compared to my brother with the same idea. By then doubling down on this community, you have to take many leaps of faith. Mm-hmm. And he do it. What about all of these queer people that we don't know? They're not that many of them, right? They're just like us, right? And so I think that we have, I hope, shattered some ceilings to be able to encourage other founders to realize that it is possible, that serving your community is a great way to have a mission and values behind your company. But that has not been an easy task. But I like Donald, we at our team often talk about being custodians of daylight, which is something that is so much bigger than any one individual on our team, because of the potential we are holding in our own hands to influence the future of our entire community. And I think that is an absolute privilege to do, but is a lot of work.
What an important and engaging conversation. I think this was one of the best sessions we've had over 3 days. Katie, we'll be reaching out to you for future MC jobs. You may have won yourself a position. And Robin, Donald, what a wonderful opportunity to hear these incredible organizations that you both are building.
Thanks so much to all.
Thanks, everybody. See you, Donald. Nice to see you, Katie.